1만 개의 한국 기업이 석유화학, 조선, 철강, 전자를 아우르는 전 분야에 진출해서 높은 수준의 경제 연대를 이루고 있습니다. 우리 정부는 오늘 또오름당 서기장과 합의한 협력 방안들을 충실히 이행하면서 양국 간의 포괄적 전략 동반자 관계를 더욱 전폭적으로 발전시켜 나갈 것입니다.
Chuyến thăm của ngài Tổng thống có ý nghĩa quan trọng, diễn ra trong bối cảnh quan hệ đối tác chiến lược toàn diện Việt Nam-Hàn Quốc đang ở giai đoạn phát triển tốt đẹp và hai nước đã trở thành đối tác tin cậy, hợp tác tầm chiến lược và là những người bạn thân thiết, hiểu biết lẫn nhau.
Congratulations to Arirang TV on 30 years of quality journalism. For 3 decades, your channel has provided valuable information and perspectives on Korea's society, economy and culture. My very best wishes for continued success over the years ahead.
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that Israel and Lebanon have agreed to extend the ceasefire by 3 weeks after talks at the White House on Thursday. He also said he's not considering using a nuclear weapon against Iran, adding he won't be rushed to end the war as Iran negotiations drag on. Iran says it has collected tolls from ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, with the first revenues already deposited into its central bank. This comes as Iran's leadership emphasized internal unity, while vowing retaliation against any aggressor. President Lee Jae-myung met with business leaders from South Korea and Vietnam in Hanoi during his state visit. He stressed the need to bolster cooperation with Vietnam on AI, semiconductors, and digital sectors. We begin this morning with the latest on the conflict in the Middle East. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced the extension of a ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel by 3 weeks, following talks at the White House. He also ruled out using nuclear weapons against Iran and said he won't be rushed to end war as negotiations with Tehran drag on. Our Kim Bo-kyung starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Thursday that he would not use a nuclear weapon in the war against Iran. Trump made the remark in answer to a reporter's question at an event focused on health care at the White House.
Why would I use a nuclear weapon when we've totally, in a very conventional way, decimated them without it? No, I wouldn't use it. A nuclear weapon should never be allowed to be used by anybody.
As for the ceasefire and the denuclearization talks, Trump said the U.S. has been continuing talks with Iran, but does not even know who is leading the country, saying they are in a state of confusion. When asked how long he is willing to wait until Iran submits a proposal for an agreement, Trump expressed his intention not to rush.
I want to make the best deal. I could make a deal right now. Do you know that if I left right now, we had a tremendous success? It would take them 20 years to rebuild, but I don't want to do that. I want to have it everlasting.
While saying the U.S. has total control of the Strait of Hormuz, he said it will open when the deal is made or something else happens that's very positive. To the possibility that Iran may have reinforced some of its military capabilities during the recent two-week ceasefire period, he said they could have loaded up a bit during the hiatus. But even so, he claimed Washington would be able to knock any gains out in about 1 day. Meanwhile, the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel was extended by 3 weeks after a high-level meeting at the White House. This meeting was the second to take place in 9 days, following the first high-level talks between the sides in 33 years held earlier this month in Washington, D.C., mediated by the U.S. Secretary of State. Trump said he looked forward to hosting the two leaders of both sides in the near future.
And we think that the president of Lebanon and the prime minister of Israel over the next couple of weeks will be coming here. They've agreed to an additional 3 weeks of no firing, ceasefire, no more firing.
He added that the U.S. will work with Lebanon to get things straightened out regarding Hezbollah. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Iran says it has begun collecting tolls from ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, with the first revenues already deposited into its central bank. The move comes as Tehran pushes to tighten control over the critical energy corridor, while emphasizing national unity amid rising regional tensions. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Iran says it has begun collecting tolls from ships transiting the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz, marking a significant step in its effort to tighten control over one of the world's most important energy routes. Parliament Deputy Speaker Hamid Reza Haji Babai said Thursday that the first revenues from transit fees have already been deposited into the country's central bank. Another lawmaker, Ali Reza Salimi, confirmed that vessels are now being charged, though officials did not disclose how many ships have paid so far. Iranian authorities say the fees vary depending on cargo type, volume, and the level of risk posed by each vessel, with Tehran determining both the rates and collection system. The move follows earlier reports, including one by the Wall Street Journal, that Iran had ordered ships to arrange payments in advance through the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, with transitions possibly made in cryptocurrency or Chinese yuan. Lawmakers have also been considering legislation that would formalize the toll system for ships passing through the narrow waterway. Amid the escalating tensions, Iran's leadership is also emphasizing internal unity. According to Iran's state-run IRNA news agency, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei said divisions among Iran's adversaries are widening, while the country's cohesion is growing stronger. He warned against what he described as foreign media efforts to undermine national stability. In a joint statement, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian and Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf stressed that Iran stands united, regardless of political differences, and vowed retaliation against any aggressor. Senior officials echoed that message, calling for solidarity under the leadership as regional tensions remain high and uncertainty continues over potential negotiations with the United States. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has met business leaders in Vietnam during his state visit with a key focus on energy security. The event was also attended by CEOs of major South Korean firms. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Business leaders from South Korea and Vietnam gathered together in Hanoi during the South Korean president's state visit. Attending the business forum on Thursday were about 500 business leaders, including South Korea's Choi Tae-won of SK Group, Lee Jae-yong of Samsung Electronics, Gu Kwang-mo of LG Group, and Shin Dong-bin of Lotte Group. Their Vietnamese counterparts included CEOs from energy firms, including Petro-Vietnam's Len Nak-son and Vietnam Electricity's Dang Hoa-nam.
오늘 이 자리에 모인 기업인 여러분이 양국 경제의 미래를 선도할 주축들이십니다.
President Lee Jae-myung stressed the need to bolster cooperation with Vietnam on AI, semiconductors, and digital sectors, for which South Korea will increase investment in production facilities. Another focal point was energy security amid the Middle East conflict, as well as cooperation on rare earths and urea solution.
지금 우리는 국제 경제 질서가 근본적으로 흔들리는 중대한 격변기의 중심을 지나고 있습니다. 30여 년 동안 쌓아온 양국의 변치 않은 우정이야말로 우리 앞에 닥친 복잡한 변화에 대응할 가장 확실한 답입니다.
Vietnam's Prime Minister Lam Minh-hung asked South Korea to expand investment in chips, AI, and clean energy, and asked for technology transfers.
The world is facing an era of great transition, of a fierce competition over reorganization of global supply chains and technology. Cooperation between Korea and Vietnam should be shifted towards quality growth.
The sentiment was echoed by business leaders.
Beyond expanding the size, we need a trade investment that yields a higher value, such as cutting-edge technology, service, and digital areas.
More than 70 business MOUs were signed for cooperation on advanced technology, infrastructure, and energy.
Hyundai Rotem signed a contract with Ho Chi Minh City to export urban trains for a metro railway project. Korea and Vietnam reaffirmed their best bilateral relationship through the reciprocal visit in such a short period of time.
The scale of the business delegation and presence of the CEOs of Korea's four major firms shows how important Korea views Vietnam, especially during this time of global trade uncertainties. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Hanoi.
South Korea's economy defied market expectations by posting its strongest quarterly growth in over 5 years in the first quarter of this year, despite geopolitical risks surrounding the conflict in the Middle East. For more, we're joined today by Professor Kim Yong-jin, professor at Seogang Business School. Professor Kim, thanks for coming on today.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
So the nation's real gross domestic product grew by 1.7% from the previous quarter. What's behind this surprise growth, and what does this tell us about the current state of South Korea's economy?
Well, as you mentioned, South Korea's economy expanded by 1.7% in the first quarter of this year, which is, marking its fastest quarterly growth in 5.5 years. According to preliminary data from the Bank of Korea, the rebound was primarily fueled by four factors, including export boom, investment recovery, and stable consumption, and policy support. Korean export jumped, 5.1%, largely driven by, IT component like semiconductors for AI infrastructure. In general, IT sector has been experiencing weak demand in the first quarter of the year, but not in this year. We need to check, whether the trend will change in the future. In terms of investment recovery, facility investment surged 4.8%, while construction investment climbed 2.8%, ending a long period of contraction in the sector. Private consumption also rose 0.5%, supported by improved household confidence and spending on goods. Lastly, I believe the large portion of the economic expansion of Korea in the first quarter is attributed to policy support. Government measures, including capital market revitalization and fuel price cap, helped ease the impact of energy cost.
I see. And SK Hynix yesterday reported a five-fold jump in quarterly operating profit, and that reached over $25 billion US. What's the significance of this, and how do you view some reports suggesting it still failed to impress investors that are questioning how long this boom in AI memory chip sales can last?
Yeah. I mean, it is amazing to see SK Hynix, record-breaking first quarter result of this year, right? I believe it highlights its dominance in the AI-driven semiconductors market, even as, some investors remain cautious about the long-term sustainability of this super cycle. The jump in operating profit of SK Hynix to 37.6 trillion, which is approximately 25 billion US, is a milestone for both the company and the broader industry. the company achieved a record high 72% operating margin, which is great, right? Surpassing the profitability of major competitors like Samsung Electronics and even the founder leader TSMC. As a primary supplier to NVIDIA, SK Hynix is capitalizing on the high demand for high bandwidth memory, which is essential for AI service. This has transitioned the memory sector from a traditional cyclical business to a core infrastructure style business. Despite the astronomical numbers to me, the stock reaction was relatively muted, rising only about 0.16% in the trade. The key reason is that the market anticipation was so high that even record results, barely met consensus. Some analysts, had projected operating profits, exceeding 40 trillion won, making the actual 37.6 trillion won feel like a slight miss to some. Moreover, quarterly revenue of 52.6 trillion won fell slightly below some analysts' forecast of 53.5 trillion won. The only matters is, analyst forecast, I guess. Even though there are some concerns about the AI sustainability among, investors, I believe the strong demand for memory chips will stay for a while. Considering the industry transformation into digital and AI will make them, which will make them just like infrastructure for any businesses.
I see. And I also want to ask you about the interest rates because the U.S. Federal Reserve is set to decide on its key interest rate next Wednesday. How do you think this will play out, and how might this decision affect the Bank of Korea's policy direction?
Yeah, just like the majority of analysts, I expect the U.S. Federal Reserve to hold interest rate steady at the range of 3.5% to 3.75% at next Wednesday's meeting. Despite strong GDP growth in early of this year, persistent inflation in tight labor market suggests that the Fed is in no rush to pivot toward easing. Recent price indices, have remained above the 2% target, and making the Fed cautious about, cutting rate too soon and risking a resurgence of inflation. The U.S. economy has shown remarkable strength. As long as growth remains solid and unemployment low, the Fed has the luxury of keeping rate high to ensure price stability. In recent weeks, Fed officials have moved from discussing when to cut to whether they need to cut at all in the first half of the year, emphasizing a higher for longer stance. The Fed decision leaves the Bank of Korea in a difficult catch-22 situation, which with the U.S. Holding rate high, the BOK cannot easily lower its own rate without risking capital flight and further won depreciation. The Korean won has also been under significant pressure recently, flirting with the 1,500 won per dollar, which is like the psychological barrier, right? A hawkish Fed prevent the BOK from providing domestic relief through a rate cut, as it must prioritize currency stability. A weak one makes energy and food import more expensive. Even if domestic demand slows, the BOK might be forced to keep rate high to prevent imported inflation from spiking. In sum, the Fed decision to stay put act as a policy anchor for South Korea, effectively locking the BOK into a restrictive stance regardless of domestic economic situation.
I see. All right, Professor Kim, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
South Korea has recorded more than 2 million foreign patients seeking treatment in a single year, for the first time since tracking began in 2009. The Ministry of Health and Welfare released the 2025 data on Friday, showing patients from 201 countries visited Korea, with the largest numbers coming from China, Japan, Taiwan, the United States, and Thailand. The number had dropped to around 110,000 during the COVID-19 pandemic, but has since rebounded sharply, doubling each year from 2023 and setting new records for 3 consecutive years. Dermatology accounted for the biggest share at 62.9%, or about 1.31 million patients, followed by plastic surgery at 11.2%, underscoring a strong concentration in cosmetic procedures. Amid the Middle East crisis, Koreans panic-bought trash bags over fears that naphtha shortages would hit production of this essential item. Though the situation has since calmed down, it hinted at the need to transition into recycling and reusing trash bags. Our An Sung-jin was out and about.
The ongoing situation in the Middle East has had unexpected effects here at home in Korea, one of them being supplies of trash bags selling out. Nearly 2 months into the conflict, I visited local supermarkets to see how the supply situation is unfolding on the ground. While trash bags are now available in more places, including this residential area in Seoul, the once easy-to-come-by items sparked panic buying at one point. Some stores had once limited purchases to single rolls only, with customers coming in asking for stock buys.
Now we have enough, so there's no limit. But when people came to hoard trash bags, we had a set number.
This wasn't an isolated case.
Since the Middle East situation, the sales of trash bags have surged, especially compared to last year.
The one shortage traced back to disruptions in resource supply, as tensions in the Middle East strained global energy markets. And in times like these, alternatives for a more reliable future are no longer optional, but essential. For more than 20 years, this company in Gyeongsang-namdo province has been recycling plastic waste into trash bags. Today, with the naphtha shortage making the headlines, their once overlooked work is now in the spotlight. Discarded plastic from industrial packaging, greenhouse vinyl, and even agricultural waste like rice straw coverings all come together at this factory. Lee, an experienced veteran in the industry for around 40 years, would sort these raw recycled pellets and melt them to transform waste into new trash bags. Even the printed labels on the bags are designed with sustainability in mind, made from soluble ink that minimizes their environmental impact. The finished products are delivered to around 10 regions across the country, supporting local supply chains during a time of strain. For Yi, the work has never been about profit.
Recycling plastic this way is something that should have been done a long time ago. Now it feels like the world is finally catching up.
Lawmakers also stress their efforts to accelerate the transition to renewable energy.
The transition will require a more structured legislative and policy framework. We aim to expand into renewables by securing the necessary budget.
The global supply uncertainties continue. Small, steady efforts like these may prove to be a path toward a more resilient and sustainable future. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. The European Union on Thursday approved a $106 billion loan package for Ukraine. The breakthrough came after oil resumed flowing through a pipeline running through Ukraine to Hungary and Slovakia. The pipeline had been turned off for nearly 3 months, which had led Hungary's now outgoing leader Viktor Orban to hold the entire package hostage. Orban's election defeat earlier this month removed the final obstacle. The package is aimed at keeping Ukraine's war economy functioning and its military supplied over the next 2 years. A United States Special Forces soldier who took part in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has been arrested after allegedly placing a $32,000 bet that Maduro would be removed from power. The soldier reportedly walked away with $400,000 in winnings. The trade drew the attention of law enforcement almost immediately. The soldier had opened the prediction market account in late December, just weeks before the U.S. military launched a covert overnight operation that pulled Maduro from the presidential palace in Caracas and transported him to New York to face federal drug trafficking charges. The medical data of 500,000 volunteers from one of Britain's most significant scientific databases has turned up listed for sale on the Chinese e-commerce platform Alibaba. Officials are calling it a serious breach of trust by rogue researchers. The UK government confirmed on Thursday that the data did not include names or addresses, but could contain gender, age, socioeconomic status, lifestyle habits, and biological samples. Alibaba has since removed the listing. Tech giant Meta has announced it is cutting 8,000 jobs. 1 in 10 of its employees face the chop as the social media giant redirects resources toward a massive artificial intelligence build-out that is pushing costs to record highs. The company told investors its expenses this year could climb as high as $169 billion, fueled by AI infrastructure and the salaries it is paying to attract top AI talent. The cuts, the company said, are about running leaner while making room for that investment.
We need to dress accordingly today. The morning began chilly, but by afternoon, it's going to feel more like early summer in many regions. Well, some of the inland regions even saw freezing morning temperatures, but highs will jump to the 20s there as well. Meanwhile, dry air is spreading to the west. A dry weather advisory is in place for the capital area now, and as you know, a tiny spark can become a major problem fast, so extra caution is needed outdoors. And under sunny skies, UV levels will be very high in most parts today. Make sure to have your sun protection items ready. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 26 degrees Celsius, Daejeon at 25, Daegu at 21 degrees. Then air quality will be fairly clean nationwide today. Then the weekend stays bright and warm with those big day-to-night temperature swings continuing. Then late Monday into early Tuesday, rain is expected across the central regions.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
The snow is accumulating rapidly. Temperatures are dropping fast, so stay safe out there. Look behind me.
way. I try my best, but you said, oh boy, me too. 'Cause I'm so done with being dumb and done with you. Do you think about us? 'Cause I'm so done with being dumb and done with you.
Wow. Oh, this is a bidding. 에너지 들어가 있어요. 우와. 맛봐도 돼요? 와우. 와, 색깔이 조금 노란색이에요. 부드러워요. You see? Beautiful little octopus shape. Yes. Perfect. They're suck.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Friday, April 24th here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Hyun.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Also, Moonji's with us today.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we've finally made it to the end of the work week, and that means it's time for our debate. Now, tomorrow marks a law day here in Korea, a moment to reflect on the role of law in our society. But it also raises an important question because not all laws sit comfortably with the public. From juvenile justice to emerging social issues, there are plenty of legal gray areas still sparking debate. So to kick off our discussion today, what controversial legal issues are currently being debated right now, Kyun?
There is a still big debate on death penalty. In South Korea, it retains capital punishment in law, but has not carried out an execution since 1997, effectively maintaining a moratorium for almost 3 decades. However, at the same time, there are some groups actually calling to resume executions to punish criminals who have convicted serious crimes. Currently, life imprisonment is the highest level of punishment practiced here in Korea at the moment.
That is a big one. Do you know of any other legal issues that are being debated?
Yeah, the debate over lowering the age of criminal responsibility has been reaching a boiling point these days. The government is actually pushing lower the age limit for juvenile offenders from currently 14 to 13. As part of this process, multiple debates and forums have taken place. Today, April 24th, marks the end of the 2-month period in which the president initially intended to deliver the results. So I think it's time for us to now just wait and see what the results are.
Right, and that is the very issue that we will be talking about today. And all of this shows how heated and complex this issue has become. So now let's look at what's driving this push in the first place. So what is behind the push to lower the age for juvenile offenders, Kyun?
Rising juvenile crime has reignited calls to lower the age threshold for criminal responsibility in South Korea. Now, over the past 4 years, the number of violent crimes committed by the so-called juvenile offenders exempt from criminal punishment has surged by more than 70%. Public anger intensified after a 2020 case in which middle school students stole a rental car and fatally struck and killed a man in his 20s while they were driving recklessly. Because they fell under the category of juvenile offenders, they were not subject to criminal punishment, sparking widespread outrage and renewed debates over the current legal standard to lower the age limit of juvenile offenders from 14 to 13. Now, there was another case in which a 13-year-old was caught by the police for stealing a total amount of over 7 million Korean won worth of money and products from an unmanned store. Now, the kid was actually caught twice and had committed theft over 20 times. And the juvenile's response at the police station was, "Too bad, I'm a juvenile offender. You cannot punish me."
No wonder that's driving people crazy. What a response. So, and that case really clearly struck a nerve with the public. It also seems to have intensified calls for accountability. So, should juvenile offenders face tougher punishments today, in your opinion, Q?
Well, in the case of the two incidents that I talked about, they should be punished with criminal offense, but so that it's not repeated and it prevents them from doing it again over and over. Now, to make matters worse, the juveniles were far from being apologetic and reflecting on what they did wrong, but rather posting on their social media about what they did and how cool it was. Like, almost they were shooting like Fast and Furious movie.
Oh my God.
And because they knew they could get away with it for being in the juvenile offender age range. In fact, a national petition calling for the perpetrators to be severely punished surpassed 800,000 signatures. Despite committing a murder, their age effectively acted as a shield from full accountability, prompting more and more growing public demands for stronger punishment.
I mean, to no one's surprise if they're showing absolutely no remorse for what they did. So we're definitely seeing a sharp divide between punishment and prevention. And that brings us to the bigger issue of effectiveness. So, Moonju, where do you stand on this issue? Should juvenile offenders face tougher punishment?
Yeah, first of all, the teenagers responsible for both incidents that Kyun just mentioned have definitely committed crimes that should have never happened and should have been punished. But I think it is time and moment for us to stand at the crossroads. Is a tougher punishment really a fundamental solution for this problem here? Evidence from other developed countries such as that harsher sentencing often leads to higher rates of recidivation. In fact, the United States, Canada, and Australia has raised the age of criminal responsibility, and in case of Denmark, they have lowered the age from 15 to 14 in 2010. But considering collateral side effects they have been experiencing, they raised it back to 15 in 2012 in 2 years. So I think instead of mere retribution, the focus should perhaps shift toward rehabilitation and education, equipping these young people with the tools, so they can safely and healthily reintegrate to the society.
Right, and what you said is more about shifting the focus from punishment to root causes, and that opens a broader debate on how we view juvenile crimes. So why are opinions so divided about this, Minju?
At its core, the debate is split between those who believe a lowering age limit will curb juvenile crime, while others are believing that it is just a superficial fix. Proponents argue that our legal framework must adapt to modern realities and how the society is changing these days, and while opponents maintain that simply changing the age threshold ignores the root causes of the problem. So academic societies are urging a shift in focus, thus moving away from raw statistics of rising frequency of crimes to the troubled backgrounds of young offenders. Of particular concern is, the recent spike in sexual crimes fueled by social media promotions that offer free access to deepfake tools. Experts argue that because many of these minors lack a stable support system from back home, we must first address the root causes of neglect before restoring to stricter sentencing.
And that is true. I mean, that does also highlight the importance of context and environment. But at the same time, others argue that the reality on the ground is changing fast, especially when these juveniles aren't seemingly showing much remorse about what they've done. So are today's juveniles more aware of their crimes, Kyun?
I personally think so.
Right.
I think they are. It's because perhaps the development of the internet and technology has led to more sophisticated criminal behavior, as all sorts of violent content can easily spread and be exposed to children before it's actually filtered and censored. The law of juveniles exempt from criminal punishment was here in Korea set about 70 years ago. And I mean, 70 years, it's a long time, right? And it seems quite outdated, and a lot of things have changed in society in terms of how fast young people grow, how mature they become, and how fast they actually receive information. Now, back when I was like 12, 13, 14, I don't even remember what I did, but because we didn't have smartphones, I was just living a different lifestyle back in Australia. But things are very different here in Korea at the moment, and not just here in Korea. Like, for example, in other countries, the minimum age of criminal responsibility varies widely, ranging from under 7 to under 16. And given that the belief they will not receive a criminal record, even if they commit crimes, is a major psychological factor among such juveniles. So lowering the age threshold can perhaps raise the sense of awareness and maybe make them at least think a few more times before actually, doing these kind of actions, because at the end of the day, it's illegal.
Right, and they need to know this as well. But also, they're not trying to lower it too dramatically as well.
Just 1 year.
Right.
I don't know how much impact it's going to have, but many lawmakers, what they back this idea by saying many perpetrators are actually at the age of 13.
I did hear this too, right? So maybe we'll have some impact,
it's actually
right?
14. 14. So they're saying, if we lower it to 13, I mean, I guess there'll be less juveniles committing these kind of crimes.
That sounds legit. So it ultimately comes down to deterrence versus rehabilitation. And both sides raise valid concerns that are hard to ignore. And that's why we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers on this. We ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking, how should serious crimes, murder, rape, or robbery committed by a child under 14 be handled? And here's what the results showed. So majority, 62%, say these offenders should receive the same punishment as adults, reflecting growing concern over the severity of such crimes. Meanwhile, 29% believe the focus should remain on rehab and education under the juvenile justice system, emphasizing the potential for reform at a young age. The remaining 9% say they are unsure, highlighting the complexity and sensitivity of the issue. So the results are quite telling. There's still a clear tilt towards tougher punishment, especially when the crimes are this serious, and also suggests that for many people, the nature of the offense is starting to outweigh the age of the offender, which really underscores how emotionally charged and complex this debate has become. And also the crimes are also becoming quite varied, and also why are juvenile theft cases specifically becoming more widespread, Kyun?
So before I answer your question, I'd like to correct myself. So I meant to say a lot of juveniles who are aged 13 were committing these kind of crimes. That's why lawmakers who are supporting to lower the age limit are saying, we should lower it to 13 from 14. Okay, so going back to your question, recently theft cases involving teenagers at unmanned stores have been increasing significantly. The problem is the fact that they exploit that as juveniles below the age of criminal responsibility, they're not subject to full legal punishment. Again, highlighting the psychological factor that plays a big role in what they do, knowing that they can get away with what they do even if it's the wrong thing. And as I brought up earlier, the 13-year-old who stole from an unmanned store over 20 times is just one big example. In fact, juvenile theft cases account for more than half of total crime types, followed by violence, accounting for around 25%, showing how common and serious theft and, of course, violence is among juveniles.
And I guess this also happens because there's also an increase of unmanned stores, which makes it easier for them to do that as well. So that case really highlights how the system can be exploited, and it raises questions beyond just serious crimes. And should minor crimes also face criminal punishment, Kyun?
It's a very good question. I think by the age of 14, many individuals are already aware of crimes such as theft that is actually considered wrong. And as seen in the cases mentioned, the reason they still commit such acts repeatedly is because they know they will not face full legal punishment. Therefore, the same level of punishment should be applied, so even at a young age, they learn what is right and allowed in society, and that it doesn't accumulate into a more serious offense later on. Now, this could be one example of prevention. Now, kids who show early signs of theft and violence should be given more attention and correction by society beyond their parents, so they can grow to become, I guess, bigger and better adults that the society really needs.
I think you give a strong argument for accountability at a young age, but others at the same time warn against going too far with punishment. So where do you stand on this issue?
Yeah, first of all, I think I do completely agree with what Kyun has mentioned earlier, but we have to remember that their age, they are very young, and even adults are very prone to making mistakes. And unless we are dealing with violent or major felonies, or dealing with those repetitive felonies, restoring to criminal sentencing is kind of a little bit an overreach, I think. Instead, I think it is time for us to think about methodologies of how we can help those teenagers to fall and put back into the right path. As part of it, I think the reformative educations are in need. Data supports these concerns, with one survey revealing that teenagers are 4 times more likely to recidivate than adults. And furthermore, the findings suggest a direct correlation between the length of a sentence and the likelihood of re-imprisonment, indicating that the longer periods of incarceration may actually heighten the risk of a minor returning to the system. So I think here is a problem that it's only putting them into the system is not a only solution that we could provide here. So since parents currently also bear the burden of compensation, increasing these civil liabilities would be a more practical or impactful way to reduce reoffending rates, I think.
And that would be about shifting responsibility beyond the individual to the family, especially because they're such young individuals. It also reframes punishment as prevention through structure. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers on this as well. So we ran a poll asking what is appropriate punishment if a child under 14 commits petty theft. And here's what the results showed. So a majority, 56%, say the responsibility should fall on the parents, reflecting the view that guidance and supervision are key at that age. Meanwhile, 24% support criminal punishment for the child, suggesting a need for stronger deterrence even in minor offenses. Another 20% believe offenders should be required to pay compensation of at least twice the value of the stolen item, pointing to a more restorative approach on this. So the results really show how people are trying to strike a balance between accountability and second chances, especially when it comes to younger offenders. And it's clear also from the results, it's not a one-size-fits-all issue. So, and with all that, we've heard both sides of the debate today. And before we wrap up, let's take a moment to reflect. So, Keen, what are your final thoughts on today's discussion?
I think today's discussion was a very interesting topic to talk about, because as grown-ups, we know how our, the young stages of our lives were. And thinking back, reflecting on my youth as a juvenile, it wasn't an easy one. I did a lot of bad things that I regret.
Hopefully not petty theft.
Okay, I don't know. I shouldn't say this on air, but no, a lot of things that I got in trouble. And I got in trouble by my mom, and she wasn't easy on me. Like, if I did something wrong, she would really punish me. She would really, really drill it into me to a point where I would think, I should never do this again. So I think parents play a big role in kids growing up, but look, that's not always the case. We've talked about these extreme cases throughout today, and probably they might not have had the parental control and education.
And these parents aren't always available either.
Exactly.
And it's kind of unfair to also put all of the responsibility on the parents as well.
That's so true. So I think it's everyone should take responsibility. And echoing the poll that was run on Arirang News YouTube channel, I agree with the majority saying it's the responsibility of parents to educate their children. But the cases like we talked about, they're kind of extreme cases where I think it stemmed from the lack of parents' kind of care and time and effort they put into their kids. But I think going beyond parents, the environment that we grow up plays a crucial role. So schools, local governments, and relevant ministries must act together to take immediate action and constantly monitor targeted groups so these violent crimes from juveniles are reduced, minimized, and not neglected. So whether reducing the legal age to 1 year will have an impact, it remains to be seen. But revising a 70-year-old law seems like the right thing to do for now.
Right, and it's a good start to change, right? So what are your thoughts on this, Minju?
Yeah, I do completely again agree with Kiyun. And you know, the debate over the age of criminal responsibility continues to evolve. And while age should definitely not be used as a shield for those who commit violent felonies, the reality remains that for those under 14, again, mistakes are often a byproduct of their development. I mean, adults all make mistakes, and if they are younger, they're even more prone to those mistakes. When we consider that, many of these youth lack a stable support system, traditionally from the juveniles, it becomes clearly that simply lowering the age threshold is not a complete answer. Sometimes, merely going too harsh on everything does not come out as positively as we have expected. And if we are dealing with young teenagers, especially if they're under 14, I believe it might only serve as a superficial fix that I've mentioned earlier. And I think it will also fail to achieve a true rehabilitation. Also, at this stage, I think the priority must shift towards providing the rehabilitative education and guidance, especially from parents and family. In my case, also, my parents never told me or anything about me failing the quiz or test, anything. But if I have done wrongdoings, I was
they're focused on more attitude, which is more important.
Yeah, that's more important. I think that's how we could protect and prevent this kind of juvenile offenders. So I think the more important thing here is giving a harsh sentencing is not really a key point here, just parental guidance, I think.
Right, and this is how you end up being as an exemplary member of society as you are.
Yeah, hopefully.
So today's discussion shows just how complex juvenile justice really is, balancing accountability with the chance to change. There may not be a perfect answer, but it's clear this debate is far from settled. And as society evolves, so too will the question of where we draw the line. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation, but News Gen will be back on Monday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Q.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you, and also Munju.
Thanks for having me today.
Thanks for coming in. And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully today we've helped you see both sides of a very great issue. We are News Generation.
개의 한국 기업이 석유화학, 조선, 철강, 전자를 아우르는 전 분야에 진출해서 높은 수준의 경제 연대를 이루고 있습니다. 우리 정부는 오늘 또오름당 서기장과 합의한 협력 방안들을 충실히 이행하면서 양국 간의 포괄적 전략 동반자 관계를 더욱 전폭적으로 발전시켜 나갈 것입니다.
Chuyến thăm của ngài Tổng thống có ý nghĩa quan trọng, diễn ra trong bối cảnh quan hệ đối tác chiến lược toàn diện Việt Nam Hàn Quốc đang ở giai đoạn phát triển tốt đẹp và hai nước đã trở thành đối tác tin cậy, hợp tác tầm chiến lược và là những người bạn thân thiết, hiểu biết lẫn nhau.